I've been on vacation for a week and there has been a ton of news, so let's buckle up and get started. Let's start with this. Nvidia has decided to bundle the game Black Myth Wukong, which seems to have a lot of interest. I mean, the game's not out yet, so we'll have to see if it ends up being a letdown or actually delivering on the hype. But Black Myth Wukong will be bundled with select RTX 40 series graphics cards. Specifically, it's the higher end, and excluding the 4060 class. So basically, a 4090, 4080 Super, 4080, 4070 Ti Super, 4070 Ti, 4070 Super, or 4070 desktop graphics cards. Notice leaving off the 4060 and 4060 Ti cards. Or laptops with 4090, 4080, or 4070 laptop GPUs. Now, this is pretty interesting. So this game, in addition to just having a lot of general user interest, appears to be the next big, full ray tracing kind of showcase. We've seen games like Cyberpunk and Alan Wake 2 get a lot of partnership from Nvidia. And this game seems to be being hyped by Nvidia as along with having one of those big feature sets, right? I've already talked about the game's overall system requirements, and Nvidia is reiterating here the overall full ray tracing system requirements, although you can refer to my previous video talking about the just overall system requirements that have been released. So despite a 3060 or 4060 apparently meeting at least some level of ray tracing requirements, again, these GPUs are not being bundled with the game. And Nvidia has released somewhere in here, I thought they had some performance charts up for the game, but whatever. If you want to see the participating retailers, you could check out this list down here. Again, all my sources will be in the video description. Now notice that this is following up from AMD having recently added in their own game bundle, which I've reported on in a previous video. This is for the 7800 XT and 7700 XT graphics cards, where you get to choose 2 games out of a set of 4, unless you live in Japan, where you get to choose 1 game out of the set of 4. And those games are Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, Starfield: Company of Heroes 3, and Lies of P. So while I don't think that in general game bundles should be the be-all and end-all deciding factor for your GPU purchase, if these are games that you would otherwise purchase, then you can factor that into the GPU, value proposition. So maybe look at which game, is it that you're more interested in, right? When it comes to Black Myth Wukong or some of these AMD bundles. But in general, if you're thinking about upgrading your graphics card, you should absolutely not just toss your old one in the closet and let it sit there without helping you fund your upgrade. I know a lot of people who do that, but again, you can stretch your budget, get that better graphics card, get that graphics card upgrade sooner if you use your old GPU to fund the upgrade. And today's sponsor, Jawa.gg, offers you the simplest and fastest way to sell your GPU. You can also check out their market of pre-built systems and GPUs and components, and using code OWEN10, you can get $10 off your first purchase. So definitely take a look at what they have available. Now, what do I mean by the simplest and fastest way to sell your GPU? So a lot of people are scared to sell it in person or just manage their own listing and all of that. So Jawa can take the hassle out of that by clicking the Get an Instant Offer button, and it works in 4 really simple steps. You tell them the GPU model and condition, and they just give you an instant offer on the website following the link in the video description or pinned comment. They give you a free shipping label, and then you mail them the GPU. So all of the shipping stuff, again, another headache for a lot of people, that's taken care of as part of the offer, and the shipping is part of all of that. So they inspect it to make sure everything's good, and if it is, then you get paid. Most sellers get paid within 1 business day after the part is received, and that's pretty much it. You can see a bunch of testimonials of happy users at Jawa. You got some FAQs here to check out, and again, check out their marketplace where I can get you $10 off your first purchase using code OWEN10, and follow the link in the video description and or pinned comment. Now, let's talk about some updates that I think a lot of you may be interested in. So Twitch's enhanced broadcasting is now available in OBS. And this is supporting Nvidia GeForce 900 and above GPUs, and there's some talk of eventually supporting other GPU vendors and things like that, but for now it looks like an Nvidia partnership on this. Now, the idea here is if you're streaming to Twitch, I think unless you have one of the higher end partnerships or whatever, I'm not a streaming expert, you send your video encode at some resolution and frame rate, right? Maybe 720p 60 FPS encode sent there, or 1080p 60 FPS. But then it would be on Twitch whether they wanted to also enable people to stream at lower resolutions doing a type of transcode, so that if they're on a slower internet connection or other type of device, they could have multiple options for what resolution and frame rate to stream at. However, I think the non-gigantic Twitch channels might not have access to that transcoding at the same level. So the idea here is that the user, the actual streamer, could do the transcoding themselves, and OBS now supports that, again, if you have a GeForce 900 series or above GPU, where you can encode multiple stream resolutions and send them off to Twitch simultaneously, so your viewers would have access to those without having to rely on Twitch providing that functionality themselves. Again, I'm not a streaming expert, but that's how I understand this. Here's the quote from Dan Clancy, Twitch's CEO, talking about this feature. Enhanced broadcasting provides two critical capabilities to streamers. First, it will create multiple encodings of your stream using dedicated encoder resources in your GPU. Having multiple encodes allows the video encoding to occur on your streaming device at multiple resolutions. Thanks to the dedicated encoders on Nvidia GeForce RTX GPUs, this will result in a higher quality stream and reduced latency for all resolutions without impacting your streaming experience. Second, this capability will provide an automatic configuration option for OBS that will optimize your settings based upon the processing power of your computer and your upload bandwidth. So that's the idea. Now, I believe that technically this whole thing is kind of in a beta mode, and take that into account. And I think you might have to, apply to get access to that beta. As I understand it, again, I'm more into gaming testing rather than streaming testing, so not my 100% area of expertise, but trying to research this to present it to you guys correctly here. Again, follow the link in the video description if you're interested in more info on that. Let's talk about some NVIDIA hardware stuff that could be interesting, although may or may not end up affecting the end user. So the RTX 4070 Ti Super normally has an AD103 GPU. But apparently we're going to be getting some models with an AD102 GPU inside. And generally when there's a different revision of the underlying hardware inside, those models don't often go worldwide. Sometimes they're limited to one region like China, something like that. This one does look like we'll even be seeing models coming to the US and other regions. Now, does that end up mattering? Well, what is the AD102 GPU? It's the actual GPU that is currently, at least for gaming graphics cards, only used on an RTX 4090. But the 4070 Ti Super is significantly less powerful than a 4090, so what happens is these AD102 GPUs would be ones that just, in the manufacturing process, didn't quite live up to what you would need to be in order to be a 4090. So if NVIDIA then doesn't have any other product that actually needs a cut down AD102 GPU, they could then cut it down even further to be replacing something like a 4070 Ti Super GPU, which would normally be AD103, which is a smaller GPU. This would be a massive cut to that silicon, though. So either the silicon's in really bad shape, or just they had a lot of stuff that just wouldn't make it as a 4090, which is kind of interesting. And the fact that it's coming to multiple regions might even indicate that there's more of this than you would expect. Now, would the end user expect these 4070 Ti Supers to be better than the AD103 normal 4070 Ti Supers? And the answer is probably not. The end goal when companies do this type of thing is for the end user experience to be exactly the same. You'll get exactly the same performance. Now, is that always the case? I think we've seen in special cases like, I think there was a 2060 KO edition that had something like this going on, where in certain non-gaming applications, parts of the die weren't fused off or limited properly, and there was some advantages to having that other GPU. But I don't anticipate that to be the case here. But still, it was kind of interesting. Now, more on the rumor side of things, a lot of people are interested in, okay, what's the latest rumor on the 50 series GPUs? The latest update I can find, again, as far as reliability, this is rumors, leaks, and the source here is Panzerlied. Anyway, I think it's German. Anyway, being reported at videocards.com, claiming that the RTX 5090 may see much improved base frequency. So this is coming from the Chip Hell forums, again from the user Panzerlied, who has leaked things in the past. But again, this isn't one of the main leakers that I think people have put more stock into, as well as just leaks and rumors in general, regardless of the source. Don't just take this as gospel. But anyway, the latest I could find is the base frequency of the 5090 is almost 2.9 G. So assuming gigahertz there, and then that means that that would be a substantial upgrade. I think that's about a 30% boost from the base clocks of a 4090. However, this is talking base frequency rather than boost frequency. So even if this ends up being true, it's possible that maybe the boost frequencies aren't a 30% increase, and that might be where you would actually be while gaming. So anyway, I'm not sure we can learn all that much from this. In general, we're expecting to at least hear about the 5090 officially in late 2024. Whether or not we actually get them before 2025 is still kind of up in the air. Some sources are saying one thing, some are saying another thing. And currently we're expecting it to be a GB202 GPU that's been cut down a bit and to include a 448-bit memory bus, which would at 28 gigabits per second, which would allow it to have 28 gigabytes of GDDR7 memory. So with the faster memory and potentially a clock speed boost, and just a lot of cores, it's certainly possible if you compare the rumored specs for the 4090 to the, what we know about the 4090 compared to the rumored specs for the 5090, that we could end up having a pretty monster GPU on hand with the 5090, but what will the price be, and will those improvements trickle down the product stack? Or will it be like the 40 series where the 4090 was a massive generational leap and everything else was more disappointing? What about AMD's latest GPU rumors? I took a look at anything I could find here, and we're seeing AMD RX 8000 graphics cards with Navi 48 GPU might be presented at CES 2025. So where is this coming from? So this is another one of those leaker tweets and forum posts where, make of it what you will, but this is Kepler, who has had things accurate in the past, but I don't think has a 100% accuracy track record or anything like that. But he's saying CES for the N48 GPU, which I believe would be the larger one, and then N44 probably not until Q2. So anyway, at this point, there's a lot of rumors stating that we won't see RDNA 4 announced until CES of 2025. That sounds pretty reasonable. So that would be, like I said, a reasonable current expectation. And again, current expectations are that RDNA 4 will have a more limited, GPU series compared to what we've been seeing from RDNA 2 and RDNA 3. Where maybe more kind of in that low and mid-range rather than having a true high-end. But again, this has all been leaks and rumors rather than official information from AMD. But there are, in addition to the just kind of rumor mill tweets and things like that, there have been, what you see in updates to certain software and things like that, where you see code names for the GPUs, where it does seem to be only seeing a Navi 48 and a Navi 44 so far for RDNA 4. So we'll have to see what actually comes of that. Now, talking about AMD in general, you're probably going to get like a flashbanged here with a white background. So, hey, tech power up, white background. Anyway, this was a really interesting read. Now, I'm not going to have time to just read through this whole thing with you, but if you're interested in AMD's plans to double down on software rather than just hardware, which a lot of people, myself included, have said has kind of been a bit of their Achilles heel when compared to the competition, this is a really interesting read. So this is from Tech Power Up, and he's talking about when he was invited to Barcelona as part of a roundtable with AMD to hear the vision of the future of the company. It looks like he had his overall headline and takeaway is AMD is becoming a software company. Here's the plan. So the idea is that they're spending a lot more money on software developers, and it's a lot more time on software development and more effort on communicating with software developers to know what they want from the hardware, making more emphasis on software APIs, AI experiences, and seeing software is no longer just a complement to the hardware, but the core of modern technological ecosystems. Again, AMD is aligning to that strategy. So while much of this ends up talking more about the business side of things and productivity and data center and all of that type of thing, I'm hoping that would also apply to their software base for their Radeon GPUs, which I'm more interested on the channel. Where, again, Nvidia has generally been more of the leader in developing the newer technologies and softwares, and AMD tends to kind of follow up with some version of it. We're still waiting. Well, FSR is getting updated. We're still waiting for it to truly match DLSS, that type of thing. So it would be cool to see what comes of that. Again, that's an interesting article to check out. Now, I thought I'd look into, okay, so what has AMD been doing recently on the gaming side of their software development? And I found this. So last month in June, I saw that there was going to be a talk on AMD doing a neural texture block compression. And now that talk has taken place, and so the information is now more out there. So this is interesting. The idea seems to be not necessarily to reduce like VRAM usage in games when using textures. It seems like it's more about shrinking the storage size required for games. I mean, seeing 150 gigabyte games is not at all uncommon now, which is a lot, right? So could we shrink that without really a performance impact or quality impact? And that seems to be the focus for the neural texture block compression. Apparently shrink storage footprint by 70%. Now, will we actually see this in games at any point? Who knows? But again, there is a paper here to take a look at it. I was considering whether or not I should read a whole bunch of this kind of summary, but I think you guys could follow this video, the link in the video description to this article if you want a bit more information on it. But the idea, again, is using neural compression techniques to store and then access the information without too much of a frame time cost. And apparently the computation cost is just once per material when it's loaded in. But looking at the length of today's video, and we got a lot left to talk about, I'll just say kind of an interesting thing to take a look at. But again, no clear indication that we're ready to see it in games anytime soon. Now, I have already talked about AMD's FSR 3.1 recently, looking at its quality and its implementation. Now, one thing I'm very happy to say is that we have now gotten the promised release of the SDK. So now on GPU Open, we have the FSR 3.1 SDK release. Now, this is really good because it's going to now make it way easier for developers to put this into their games. And getting this version of FSR into games is a really big deal because one of the main changes behind it is that it will now be easier to upgrade to future versions for game developers, but probably also for the end user by just dragging and dropping DLL files in the same way that people are able to manually update the version of DLSS in games. So this would now more get onto that, process for how this would work. Again, the big deals with FSR 3.1 is decoupling frame generation from upscaling, improvements to the upscaling quality, API implementation, and Vulkan implementation. And there's some interesting information about all of that here. Now, one thing I will note that didn't seem to be talked about much with the FSR 3.1 update, it was more about the decoupling and the improvements to the upscaler, is actually they do talk about improvements to the frame pacing with the frame generation. So they do claim that FSR 3.1 includes many fixes to frame generation to ensure frames presented to the user are as high quality as possible. This also includes additional changes to frame pacing to assist with smoothing out frame times even more than before. Also interesting to note, because I'm not sure everybody's aware of this, they also say that anti-lag should actually be disabled in your AMD driver software for the best frame pacing experience. So they're saying that currently anti-lag is not fully compatible with a good frame pacing in FSR 3.1. So that's interesting information. But again, it's also interesting that apparently there were frame generation quality improvements and pacing improvements in the 3.1 update when most of the focus seemed to be looking at the upscaling improvements. Anyway, there's a lot of information here that's pretty interesting, but I think those are the highlights for the purposes of a news video. Now, the other big AMD news that I found interesting was, okay, so we're expecting, it's still rumored, but we're expecting the launch of AMD's new 9000 series desktop processors on July 31st. That's the current rumored date. And that means that we're starting to see more leaked performance numbers. So Geekbench now has leaks, and sometimes multiple leaks per CPU, for the pretty much the whole lineup. We've got the 99, yeah, it is the whole lineup. We've got the Ryzen 9 9950X, as well as the 9900X, the 9700X, and that 9600X. And then you can use those Geekbench results to compare to CPUs we already have out now, as well as these to each other. Now, one big thing to take note of is early leaked Geekbench results. We don't know, for example, is PBO being enabled or disabled? Are all these CPUs on the same motherboard? And are the motherboards they're using on the same like AGISA revision, and all sorts of variables. So again, this is early leaked results, in no means a final CPU review, but videocards.com has helpfully tabulated the results that we see so far. So this is sorted by single thread performance, and then you can also see the multi-thread score. Now, the 9900X, not the 9950X, actually is showing the top result for single threading, which is why videocards.com is speculating that perhaps that one had PBO enabled and maybe the 9950X did not. And then we also have like 9700X scores that are higher than some other 9700X scores. So again, is that a PBO enabled versus a stock? So again, early leaked information, make of it what you will. In general, it doesn't look like we're seeing any kind of massive uplift compared to the 7000 series in single-thread performance, but it is in line with what AMD claimed. I believe AMD's official announcement slides claimed something like a 10 to 15% IPC uplift, and this seems to be within the realistic realm of what we would expect from that. And then you can look at the multi-threading results as well over here. I think in general, we're not going to see much better gaming performance and possibly worse gaming performance than something like a 7800X 3D. So a lot of people may be interested in waiting for the X3D version of the 9000 series chips in order to upgrade or buy if you're going for a gaming-focused build. Now, in relation to the 9000 series X3D chips, the latest information I can find on this is that the 3D V cache will be basically structured the same amounts and the same product stack basically as the 7000 series, where you have a 9950X3D, 9900X3D, and a 9800X3D, where you'll have your 16 core version where half of the cores get the 3D V cache, and it's the same amount as we had with the previous generation. The one that surprised me the most, if this ends up being true, because again, to be clear, this is still kind of leaks and rumors territories, not official. The thing that surprises me the most, if it ends up being true, is still having a 6-core 12-thread variant. Not 6-core, sorry. A 12-core variant where 6 of the cores would have 3D V cache and the other 6 wouldn't, because that clearly was by far the least popular chip from the 7000 series when they did that. So kind of surprising to me that they would do that, unless it just makes sense from just maybe you just get some of these dies that are just not quite up to snuff, so you have to use them as that. I don't know. But anyway, that's what we're seeing there, and this certainly seems to be, if the rumored release date of around September ends up being true, but again, that's just rumored, this seems worth waiting for from the gaming perspective side of things. Now, in the meantime, keep in mind that while we don't know official pricing, we might expect something like 9600X to cost around $300, because that's where the 7600X launched at. But notice that right now the 7600X is down to $171.50 from a couple of retailers if you wanted to buy one new right now. So given, if we go back to the kind of rumored performance numbers that we're seeing here, it really feels like if you're trying to do a more value, mid-range gaming build, buying a new 9600X, if they end up costing anything like $300, if you look at its performance versus 7600X, like, sure, it's better, but, if you could get one of these at basically half the price right now while the previous generation's on sale, certainly something to consider from that value perspective. Now, in addition to NVIDIA and AMD news, I was also looking for the latest Intel news, especially for their graphics cards. And here's the latest leaks and rumors I can find on this, because again, we're still in, far enough out on these that we're in leak and rumor territory. The latest one is that these Battlemage GPUs are expected to use TSMC's 4nm process. I'm seeing this reported by videocards.com, but their source appears to be from DigiTimes. And, I don't know how interesting this is really, other than, it looks like Intel is still not going to be using their own foundries for their GPUs. They'll be using TSMC. It's also rumored that then for their next generation, they could possibly go down to the TSMC 3nm. But in general, if we don't end up seeing these GPUs until 2025, when we're getting new generations from AMD and Nvidia, I don't know, I'm hopeful that there's a massive, performance and also just, compatibility and software stack, everything works right. I really want Intel to do well with Battlemage. I want more competition, especially value-oriented competition in the GPU space. So we're hoping for the best, but we still don't have a ton of information here. We'll see how it goes. In other Intel-related news, I saw, and this might also speak to it could be a while before we get Battlemage, I'm seeing that ASRock is launching updated versions of their Arc A770 and A750 GPUs. They're launching a Challenger SE, which I think is special edition graphics cards. I think it looks pretty similar to what they already had with their Challenger series. I think there's now a toggleable light available on it. But the point that I find most interesting is if they're launching an updated version of their Arc Alchemist GPUs, then maybe it's going to be a while before we see Battlemage versions. So make of that what you will. Now, moving on to some kind of just random info I found pretty interesting. So I'm really annoyed by all of the different RGB lighting software. If you try to build an RGB build, and especially if you go with a bunch of different manufacturers, for all of that, you might have a whole bunch of different RGB software programs on your PC. And Windows has been trying to get into the game of simplifying that to enable dynamic lighting control directly through Windows. But not everything's compatible with it. It's looking like ASUS, at least on certain motherboards, has enabled RGB control through Windows Dynamic Lighting. Now, you probably wouldn't have access to as detailed of control as you would through ASUS's software, but it might be nice to have some control without installing their software at all. So that's pretty cool. Another quick update I found interesting was an interview with PlayStation 5's lead system architect, and his thoughts on, he was surprised how fast a lot of games on console ended up using ray tracing, because apparently it was a very last-minute addition to the PlayStation 5 feature set. And he's also surprised how many games have kind of defaulted to 60 FPS, when in previous generations, oftentimes 30 FPS was the console target. But he's also been surprised at how simple PC ports of PlayStation games have been, although often it's taken a bit higher system specs for PCs due to not having some of the bespoke systems that a PS5 has for certain features that the games may have been programmed to rely on. So that was pretty interesting. Also kind of in console and PC related news, console US spending declined massively compared to last year. But Ghost of Tsushima has resurged as a top seller, and that seems to be indicating that Sony's PC strategy of releasing games on PC is continuing to pay off and be successful for them financially. So I hope that continues to go. I love getting those PlayStation games onto PC. In Xbox and somewhat PC-related news, if you're interested in Game Pass, Game Pass prices will increase and there'll be new tiers available. The worst side of this appears to be for console users, where you can't just subscribe to the console version of the streaming. I think you have to get the ultimate version to get this, cloud and day one access, which also bundles you in with PC, but it looks like PC users can still get the more basic version. But in general, pricing will be increasing. So if you're interested in Game Pass or using Game Pass, be aware of potential price increases and things like that. In addition to possibly getting more games day one, like moving to getting Call of Duty games onto Game Pass and things like that. Now, I'm going to end with a couple of interesting mini PC designs. So apparently the Cybertruck mini PC that people saw at Computex is actually going into production, as you can see here. Looks like it has can fit 2 fans for cooling design in here. So if you want a Cybertruck themed mini PC, apparently that will be a thing that you can get. Which, interesting. I love that videocards.com puts the comparison up against an actual Tesla Cybertruck and against the KFC console. Which was an interesting meme device that never actually released a couple of years ago. Now, in another maybe less meme-worthy mini PC design, I'm seeing this at Tom's Hardware, where it's a folding keyboard that actually contains a full mini PC inside of it. Now, there's no display, so you would just plug into a display, and away you go. Looks like you have a trackpad kind of built into it, so just plug in and you've got yourself a cool functioning little mini PC. Don't forget to check out jawa.gg to fund your upgrade by selling your old GPU hardware, and check out their listings and get $10 off your first purchase using code OWEN10. I hope all of you have an excellent day.